ministerial task team led by Kamalasen Chetty will be urgently looking into ending the captive lion breeding here in South Africa. Well, this comes amid growing international as well as local pressure to end the practice they call cruel and barbaric. Environmental Minister Barbara Creecy appointed the task team to review policies, legislation, as well as practices on matters related to the handling and management and breeding, hunting, as well as trade of elephant, lion, leopard and rhinoceros. And joining us now to discuss this issue further is the chairperson of the task team, Mr. Kamalasen Chetty. Cam, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Why is the captive lion breeding industry being banned now?
Thanks, Alicia. And look, let's start off by saying that, the lions associated with South Africa are iconic species. They're in our hearts, as well as, they are associated with wildlife, as well as with the biodiversity in Africa. Now, what we've been seeing is that in 2018, or before 2018, there was an enormous amount of pressure on government from NGOs, international communities, and so on, about captive breeding of lions. And when I say captive breeding of lions, it's the raising of lions, it's as well as the hunting of lions, as well as both trophy hunting and exporting of the bones, or what we call the lion derivatives. Now, these lions are kept in captivity, and I think there's a lot of the environmentalists and people who believe in sustainable development actually do not like the practices. But more than that, so we've seen in a number of reports across South Africa and even across the world that this particular industry, and when I say it's an industry, it's not every single breeder of them. There are a number of industry institutions and industry farmers that have been raising lions in a very irresponsible and unsustainable way. So the NSPCA has raised these issues. There's unethical tourism in it, and the lions are habitated. So in other words, they don't know the difference between danger or between a hunter who is dangerous and another human being. So they view all of human beings in the same way. So when we look at this kind of practice, hunting is therefore not a sport. It becomes, one in which it is captive, and it's called canned lion hunting in this instance. And there are a number of other reasons, The other reason is that this is selected breeding, and in the natural environment, we have natural selections. So the lions that are the strongest and more agile survive and so on. What we do have as a result of that, we have selective breeding and sometimes inbreeding of lions in that instance. And there are a number of reports and so on talking about the dangers of that, as well as the dangers of zoonotic diseases. There were about 83 different diseases identified that can spread to other animals and to human beings. But essentially, it's caused a reputational damage to our industry. So South Africa is very well known and for having, I think, particularly a really good biodiversity and wildlife. And what the bad practices in this industry is doing is it's damaging that. So if we want to build this industry, get more jobs, create great tourism opportunities and so on, it's a massive, untapped and sustainable socioeconomic activities that come out of there. And one of the first things we need to do is address that, the particular reputation that it has. So in short, what I want to say that in 2018, there was a parliamentary colloquium, and the parliamentary colloquium indicated that, and it's best summed up by the chair, it says, we need to come up with a solution as quickly as possible, and we can't allow our international reputation to be soiled by these practices. In 2019, the minister set up a high-level panel, and the high-level panel made specific recommendations around the lion industry.
But Cam, let me just jump in there. Cam, let me just, sorry to jump in there. I just want to understand this.
Sure.
I mean, was this sector not previously regulated in line, of course, with South African environmental legislation? And also, what is the role then of the Ministerial task team on captive lion breeding?
Yeah, okay, good questions. So it was regulated, and it's what we have is the regulation takes place in the 9 different provinces. So the first problem that we have, it's a provincial competency, and the regulation, each province differs from one province to another. So it's not even regulations. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. The second thing is sometimes these regulations get abused by the facility owners. Not all of them, but a substantial number of them abuse these particular. Thirdly, that in the capacity, both from the department and other regulators, we don't have enough capacity. We have over 500 odd facilities like this. So to be able to regulate them is quite difficult. So the role of the task team is, one, to start off by, so the high-level panel, to finish that story, the high-level panel has effectively said we must stop this industry and phase it out. So part of the phasing out mechanisms is to get to some kind of win-win situation where we talk to the industry and the facility owners and say, would you like to voluntarily exit the industry? Mm-hmm. We know they're having pain at the moment. They're not allowed to export bones since 2019. And we've heard stories that this happens illegally and so on. And it's quite an expensive industry or facility to maintain, and if you do it properly. So in cutting corners, we see that the animal welfare and animal well-being are severely affected. So this task team is giving an opportunity to lion facility owners to say, why don't you exit the industry? Mm-hmm. And in exiting the industry, mm-hmm. we come up with options. Correct.
All right. And then, Cam, what type then of support is going to be afforded to the owners and farmers that will heed the call, as you've just said, to volunteer to exit the industry? And also, how do the breeders then register to volunteer to exit the industry should they wish to do so?
Sure. It's the registration is fairly simple. The registration, it's facility by facility. Registration is, there's a website on which you register, and you get a form, and that form asks you some basic questions. However, it's very simple. Send me an email to kchetty@dffe.co.za, and I will follow that up. So the kind of support that we want to provide to industry is, firstly, there are 3 components of it. The first component is the facility itself, and we want to look at the transition of the facility. And you may look at other agricultural activity. A lot of these farmers, in fact, do multiple things. They keep lions as well as other cattle and other animals and so on. And we may want to move to cattle and other areas. The second thing is, specifically on the lions itself, it's very important to weed out those lions that are compromised. And we have veterinarian services that we will provide for those particular volunteers freely. We'll also look at moving lions to some kind of sanctuary or sunset facility for which they would live their lives happily. And for that, we'll provide all of the support, the sterilization, the nutrition, the relocation support, and so on for the lions itself. And finally, and probably very importantly, is for the workers. So the strategy we're developing also looks at the workers of these particular industries. We went and visited a few of these facilities and met some of the workers. And clearly what we need to do is, we believe we can reskill the workers either to fit into the new transformed industry, or move them into sanctuaries and other sunset facilities that is there. So what we're doing is, we're appealing to the industry to actually support this and come up with a win-win situation.